My brother got my fiancée pregnant, and my parents decided to defend him, pushing me out so the baby would have a father. So I got my revenge in the cruelest way possible. Before I tell you about the explosive ending to this nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. The private dining room of the steakhouse smelled like roasted garlic and expensive red wine. I was sitting across from Sarah, the woman I was supposed to marry in exactly 3 weeks. My parents, Robert and Susan, sat to my left. They were smiling, raising their glasses, completely oblivious to the bomb that was about to detonate right in the middle of our family. My younger brother, Dylan, sat to my right. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his water glass, his hands shaking slightly. I thought he was just nervous about his upcoming toast as my best man. I had no idea he was gathering the courage to destroy my life. Dylan stood up. He didn't raise a glass. He just placed his hands flat on the white tablecloth and looked at our parents. He completely bypassed my gaze. He cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "Mom, Dad, Mason, I have something to say." He paused, swallowing hard. "Sarah is pregnant." A massive wave of confusion washed over me. I looked at Sarah. We had decided to wait until after the wedding. I smiled, thinking this was some bizarre prank, or maybe she was announcing it in the strangest way possible. But Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes. She was looking down at her lap, her face pale, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. Then Dylan dropped the rest of the sentence. "And the baby is mine." The heavy crystal wine glass slipped from my fingers. It hit the edge of my plate and shattered, sending dark red liquid spilling across the pristine white cloth like blood. The sound of the breaking glass seemed to echo in the room for an eternity. I waited for someone to laugh. I waited for the punchline, but my mother just gasped and covered her mouth. My father sat back in his chair, his face turning an angry shade of purple. I looked at Sarah again. "Tell me he is lying," I said. My voice didn't even sound like my own. It was a hollow, raspy whisper. "Sarah, look at me." She finally looked up. Her eyes were red, filled with a sickening mix of guilt and defiance. "I'm sorry, Mason. It happened. We didn't mean to." I stood up so fast my chair crashed to the floor behind me. My fists were clenched so tight my fingernails were cutting into my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to wrap my hands around my brother's throat. But before I could move, my father slammed his hand down on the table. "Mason, sit down." My father barked, his voice carrying the absolute authority he always wielded in our house. "Sit down and act like a grown man. We are going to figure this out as a family." "Figure this out?" I yelled, the shock finally giving way to a blinding, fiery rage. "He slept with my fiancée. She is pregnant with his child. And that child needs a father." My mother suddenly cried out, reaching across the table to grab Dylan's arm protectively. "Dylan made a mistake, but he is stepping up. We have to think about the baby, Mason. You have to be reasonable." Reasonable. My entire future had just been burned to the ground, and they were asking me to be reasonable. I didn't say another word. I turned around and walked out of that restaurant, stepping out into the cold night air, leaving my family behind. To understand how deep that knife went, you have to understand the life I had built before that night. 4 years earlier, I was a junior architect working 80-hour weeks at a high-pressure firm in downtown Chicago. I was the guy who stayed late checking structural loads, the guy who came in on weekends to fix other people's CAD drawings. I didn't have a trust fund. I didn't have parents paying my rent. Every single dollar I had, I earned through sweat and sleepless nights. I met Sarah during that time. She was working in marketing for a real estate developer we partnered with. She was beautiful, ambitious, and seemed to understand my drive. We moved in together after a year of dating. I thought we were building a foundation. I approached my life the same way I approached my architectural designs. Calculate the risks, build a solid base, and ensure the structure can withstand any storm. When I finally got my promotion to senior architect, it came with a significant bump in my salary. The first thing I did was buy the ring. It was a 2-carat diamond, custom set. I poured my savings into it. I proposed to Sarah on a rooftop overlooking the city skyline, and she said yes with tears in her eyes. Everything was going exactly according to the blueprint. During our engagement, we spent countless nights sitting on our living room floor, surrounded by wedding magazines and fabric swatches. We booked a stunning historical estate just outside the city for the ceremony. I paid the non-refundable deposits. I hired the caterer. I even designed the floral arrangements because I wanted everything to be perfect for her. But looking back, there were cracks in the foundation I ignored. My friend Elijah had warned me. Elijah and I went to college together, and he was the one guy who always told me the truth. We were having beers one night, and he mentioned that Sarah seemed to spend a lot of time texting when I was talking to her. He also pointed out that her best friend, Qley, was always making subtle, passive-aggressive comments about how much I worked. Qley constantly planted seeds in Sarah's mind that a woman shouldn't have to compete with a career for her man's attention. I brushed it off. I told Elijah that Sarah understood my goals. I was building a future for us. I was a fool. While I was building a career, my brother Dylan was building a resume of failures. Dylan is 5 years younger than me, and from the day he was born, he was my mother's golden boy. He was charming, he was athletic, and he possessed an incredible talent for avoiding responsibility. If Dylan crashed his car, my parents bought him a new one. If Dylan dropped out of college classes because they were too boring, my parents paid the tuition penalties and told him he just hadn't found his passion yet. I was the responsible one. Dylan was the one who needed protection. The contrast between us was never more obvious than a year before the wedding. Dylan wanted to impress a girl he was dating, so he tried to rent a Lamborghini for the weekend. Predictably, his credit cards were declined at the rental agency. Instead of telling him no, my father called me. I was in the middle of a major client presentation. My dad demanded I transfer $3,000 to Dylan's account immediately so the boy wouldn't be embarrassed. When I refused, telling my father Dylan needed to learn the value of $1, my parents didn't speak to me for a month. They ended up taking out a personal loan to give Dylan the money. Dylan resented me. He hated that I had a stable career, a beautiful fiancée, and a life I had earned. I saw it in the way he looked at my apartment, the way he asked invasive questions about my salary, and most of all, the way he looked at Sarah. Whenever Sarah and I visited my parents' house, Dylan was always hovering. He would laugh a little too loud at her jokes, stand a little too close to her in the kitchen, and constantly try to undermine me in front of her. Mason is always so serious, Dylan would say, pouring Sarah another glass of wine while I was helping my dad with the grill outside. You must get bored waiting up for him all the time. If you were with me, we'd be out having fun. I thought it was just annoying little brother behavior. I thought Sarah saw right through his shallow, pathetic attempts for attention. I didn't realize he wasn't just flirting. He was systematically dismantling my life while I was busy paying for it. 2 hours after I walked out of that steakhouse, I was sitting in the dark in my apartment. The apartment I shared with Sarah. The apartment I had paid the mortgage on for the last 3 years. The front door unlocked, and she walked in. She looked exhausted, her makeup smeared. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the armchair in the corner. "Pack your things," I said. My voice was completely flat. She jumped, dropping her purse on the floor. "Mason, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I asked, standing up. "Explain how you accidentally tripped and fell into my brother's bed? Explain how you managed to hide a pregnancy for months while smiling in my face and trying on wedding dresses." She started crying again, the kind of ugly, desperate crying that used to break my heart. Now it just made my skin crawl. "It was a mistake," she sobbed. "You were always working. You were never here. Dylan came over one night to help me put together that bookshelf you didn't have time for. We were drinking. I was lonely, Mason. I just wanted someone to pay attention to me." "So you slept with my brother. It only happened twice," she blurted out as if that somehow made it better. "But then I found out I was pregnant. Mason, I didn't know what to do. I was terrified." "You were terrified?" I scoffed. "You were perfectly fine letting me pay for a wedding while carrying his kid. She stepped toward me, reaching out. I stepped back, disgusted. "Dylan says he loves me," she whispered. "He says he wants to be a real father to this baby. Mason, a child needs a father. A real family. Dylan is willing to give us that. You wouldn't want to raise your brother's child? Would you?" The sheer audacity of her words struck me like a physical blow. She wasn't apologizing. She was justifying it. She and her toxic friend Qley had convinced themselves that this was the pragmatic choice. I worked too much. Dylan was available. I was the provider. Dylan was the fun distraction. And now, because they had created a massive, unforgivable mess, they were wrapping it up in the noble excuse of doing what's best for the baby. "Get out," I said, pointing to the door. "Pack a bag and get out of my house. I will have the rest of your things sent to my parents' place. Since they love him so much, they can take care of you, too." If Sarah's betrayal was a knife in the back, my family's reaction was a slow twist of the blade. A week after the disastrous dinner, I still hadn't heard from my parents. No apology. No check-in to see if I was surviving. Then, I got a phone call from my Aunt Martha. Martha was my father's sister, a tough, no-nonsense woman who had always seen right through my parents' favoritism. "Mason," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Have you spoken to your father?" "No," I replied. "And I don't plan to." "You need to check your bank accounts," she said. "The shared account. The one your grandfather set up for your college fund that your parents still have their names on." My stomach dropped. Years ago, my grandfather had left a modest inheritance for me, meant for college. Because I had secured full academic scholarships, I never touched it. I had left it in a joint account my parents managed, planning to use it for a down payment on a house for Sarah and me after the wedding. I pulled up my banking app on my phone. The account, which had held nearly $40,000, was drained. The balance was zero. I called my father immediately. He answered on the second ring, his tone defensive. "Mason, I was going to call you. Where is my money?" I demanded. "Now calm down," he said. "Dylan and Sarah need a place to live. They have a baby coming. And since you canceled the wedding, the deposits were lost. We had to use that money to secure an apartment for them, and to help pay for a small ceremony so they can be married before the baby arrives. It's the right thing to do, Mason. You have a good salary. You can make that money back. Dylan has nothing." I was hyperventilating. They stole my money. They took the money my grandfather left me to pay for my brother's wedding to the woman who cheated on me. "You stole from me," I said, my voice trembling with rage, "to reward him for destroying my life." "We are protecting our family," my father snapped. "You are being selfish, Mason. You only care about your own pride. Dylan is taking responsibility. We are acting as a family." "You don't have a family," I said. "Not anymore. Don't ever call me again." I hung up the phone. Aunt Martha called back 10 minutes later. She told me she had driven to my parents' house, screamed at my father until she lost her voice, and officially cut ties with her brother. She was the only one who stood by me. That night, I packed my most essential belongings. I couldn't stay in that city anymore. I broke my lease, threw away the wedding plans, and drove away in the rain. The first 6 months after leaving Chicago were a blur of cheap whiskey and dark motel rooms. I transferred to a smaller branch of my architectural firm in Denver, Colorado. I needed mountains. I needed distance. But running away doesn't cure the disease. It just changes the scenery. I fell into a deep, crushing depression. I stopped shaving. I lost 20 pounds. I went to work, stared at AutoCAD blueprints until my eyes blurred, and went back to my empty apartment to drink until I passed out. I felt completely emasculated. My brother had taken my woman, my parents had taken my money, and they had all effectively agreed that I was disposable. The absolute lowest point came on what was supposed to be my wedding day. I was sitting on my couch, a half-empty bottle of bourbon on the coffee table. Against every ounce of common sense I possessed, I opened social media. There it was. Dylan and Sarah had gotten married. They didn't have a small ceremony like my father claimed. They had taken over the exact historical estate I had booked. They used the exact same florist I had hired. Sarah was wearing a white dress, her pregnant belly clearly visible. Dylan was wearing a custom tuxedo, smiling widely, looking like the king of the world. My parents were standing next to them in the photos, beaming with pride. They had literally stepped into the life I built and claimed it as their own. I stared at the screen until my vision swam. I felt physically sick. I ran to the bathroom and threw up until my ribs ached. I laid on the cold tile floor for hours, staring at the ceiling. I wanted to die. I genuinely didn't see the point in waking up the next day. Everything I had believed in, hard work, loyalty, family, was a complete lie. That night, I permanently deleted all my social media accounts. I changed my phone number. I sent an email to Aunt Martha with my new contact info and explicitly told her not to share it with anyone. I became a ghost. I decided that if my family wanted me dead, I would give them exactly what they wanted. Mason, the dutiful son and loving fiancé, was dead. I probably would have drank myself to death if it hadn't been for Mr. Carter. He was the senior partner at the Denver firm. A hard-nosed, old-school architect in his late 60s who drove a vintage Porsche 911 and didn't tolerate excuses. One Tuesday morning, I didn't show up to work. I didn't call in. I was passed out on my couch. At noon, someone started pounding on my apartment door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the sound of someone trying to break the door down. I stumbled out of bed, hungover and angry, and yanked the door open. Mr. Carter stood there in a three-piece suit, looking at me with pure disgust. "You smell like a brewery, Mason," he said, pushing past me into the apartment. He looked around at the pizza boxes and empty bottles. "I read your transfer file. You were the top producer in Chicago. Now you're submitting sloppy drafts and missing deadlines. What the hell is wrong with you?" I was too exhausted to lie. I sat down heavily on a dining chair and told him. I told him everything. The brother, the fiancé, the stolen money, the wedding photos. I expected him to offer some polite sympathy and tell me to take a week off. Instead, Mr. Carter walked over to the window, looked out at the street, and turned back to me. "So you're letting them win?" "Excuse me?" I said, offended. "They took your money and your girl, and your response is to destroy your own career?" He asked, his voice sharp like a razor. "You're handing them the ultimate victory, son. You're proving your father right. You're showing them that without them, you are nothing but a pathetic drunk." His words hit me like a bucket of ice water. "You're an architect," Carter continued, walking toward the door. "When a structure collapses, you don't sit in the rubble and cry. You clear the debris, pour a stronger concrete foundation, and you build a skyscraper that casts a shadow over everyone who doubted you. Clean yourself up. Be at the office at 7 a.m. tomorrow. If you're late, you're fired." He left, slamming the door behind him. I stood in the silence of my apartment. He was right. Every drink I took, every day I wasted was a gift to Dylan. I walked into the bathroom, looked at my haggard reflection in the mirror, and turned on the cold water. I shaved. I threw away every bottle of alcohol in the house. I took the pain, the betrayal, and the humiliation, and I locked it inside a steel vault in my mind. I decided right then and there, my revenge wouldn't be violent. My revenge would be massive, untouchable success. For the next 2 years, I was a machine. I worked with a ruthless efficiency that intimidated my colleagues. I brought in massive commercial contracts. I was promoted to lead project manager, and my salary tripled. I bought a modern, minimalist house in the hills. I drove a sleek, black car. On the outside, I was the picture of success. Inside, I was completely hollow. I didn't date. I didn't trust anyone. Then I met Emily. Emily was the lead interior designer for a massive hotel project my firm had landed. She wasn't like Sarah. Sarah had been soft, dependent, and easily manipulated. Emily was sharp, fiercely independent, and commanded a room the moment she walked into it. We clashed immediately over the lobby design. I wanted stark, modern lines. She wanted warmth and texture. We ended up staying late one Friday night at the site, arguing over blueprints. By midnight, we were sitting on the floor, eating terrible takeout Chinese food, and laughing. It was the first time I had genuinely laughed in 3 years. Emily didn't push. She let me set the pace. We dated for 6 months before I told her about my past. We were sitting on my patio, looking at the city lights. My voice shook as I told her about Dylan and Sarah, about my parents stealing my college fund, about the absolute humiliation of it all. I expected her to look at me with pity. I expected her to see me as damaged goods. Instead, Emily reached out, grabbed my hand, and looked me dead in the eye. "They didn't break you, Mason," she said firmly. "They stripped away everything fake in your life, and what was left was solid steel. I respect the man you are today. And I am so incredibly sorry for what that boy had to go through." She didn't try to fix me. She simply stood beside me. A year later, we got married. It was just the two of us, Mr. Carter, and my Aunt Martha at a beautiful courthouse in the mountains. There were no fake relatives, no stolen money, no anxiety. It was real. It was mine. Life was finally good. I made partner at the firm. Emily's design business was booming. We had a beautiful home, 2 dogs, and a marriage built on absolute trust. We decided we were ready to start a family. I wanted to be the father I never had, a father who protected his children equally, who valued integrity over appearances. But life has a cruel sense of humor. Month after month, nothing happened. We went to specialists. We ran tests. The doctors told us we had unexplained infertility issues. We started in vitro fertilization, IVF. If you haven't been through it, you cannot comprehend the toll it takes. The daily hormone injections, the constant monitoring, the emotional roller coaster of hoping and waiting, only to be crushed by a negative test. On our second round of IVF, Emily got pregnant. We were ecstatic. We painted the nursery. We bought a crib. But at 10 weeks, we lost the baby. I remember holding Emily on the bathroom floor as she cried until she couldn't breathe. In that dark moment, my old demons came rushing back. The vault in my mind cracked open. I convinced myself this was karma. I had abandoned my parents. I had walked away from my blood. Maybe I was cursed. Maybe God was telling me that because I couldn't forgive my family, I didn't deserve to start my own. I told Emily this late one night. I told her I was broken, that my family's toxicity had somehow infected my DNA, and that I was dragging her down with me. Emily sat up in bed, her eyes fierce despite her grief. "Don't you ever say that again," she commanded. "Do not give those people the power to take this from us, too. They do not control the universe, Mason. They are just pathetic, selfish people. This is our journey. It is hard, and it is unfair, but it is ours. We are going to fight for our family, and we are going to win." She was my anchor. We agreed to try one more round of IVF. But just as we were gearing up for the emotional battle again, the ghost of my past decided to reach out from the grave. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office, reviewing a contract, when my private cell phone rang. I didn't recognize the Chicago area code, but something in my gut twisted. I answered it. "Mason?" The voice was older, raspy, but unmistakable. It was my father. For years of absolute silence. And here he was, sounding as casual as if he was calling to ask about the weather. I froze. My hand gripped the edge of my desk. "How did you get this number?" "Martha gave it to me," he said. I knew that was a lie. Aunt Martha would never betray me. He probably hired a private investigator to find me. "Listen, son. It's been a long time. Too long. A family shouldn't be separated like this." I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "We aren't a family. Mason, please. Your mother misses you. Dylan misses you." The sound of his name made my blood boil. "Dylan has grown up a lot. He's a father now. We are all going to be in Denver next week for a convention your mother wanted to attend. We want to see you. We want to take you out to dinner. Let's just sit down, clear the air, and move forward." I was about to hang up. I was about to tell him to go to hell and throw my phone against the wall. But then I paused. For 4 years, they thought I was a failure. They thought I was the broken man who ran away in the night. They thought Dylan was the winner. I looked around my massive corner office. I looked at the framed photo of my beautiful wife on my desk. I thought about the pain they had caused me, and the agonizing struggle Emily and I were going through right now to build a family, while Dylan and Sarah were handed everything. A dark, cold calculation settled over me. Mr. Carter had told me to build a skyscraper. It was time to show them the view from the top floor. Fine, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Next Thursday, I'll text you the address of the restaurant. I'll bring my wife. Your wife? My father said, surprised. You got married? That's wonderful, Mason. We can't wait to meet her. Oh, you will, I said, and hung up. I went home and told Emily about the call. I told her I wanted to face them, not to reconcile, but to show them they couldn't destroy me. Emily didn't hesitate. Tell me what to wear, she said. I chose the most exclusive, expensive restaurant in Denver. A place where the lighting was dim, the service was impeccable, and making a scene was the ultimate social sin. I wanted my family to feel entirely out of their element. Emily and I arrived first. She looked breathtaking in a sleek, emerald green dress. I wore a tailored suit. When the hostess led my family to the table, I watched them walk across the room. The years had not been kind to them. My parents looked exhausted, their posture hunched. But it was Dylan and Sarah who caught my attention. Dylan, the golden boy, looked bloated and miserable. His suit was cheap and poorly fitted. He had dark circles under his eyes and a nervous twitch in his jaw. Sarah looked completely drained, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, her fake smile straining the corners of her mouth. They brought 2 kids with them, a toddler in a high chair and a boy about 4 years old. The older boy, Julian, stopped me dead in my tracks. He had my eyes. He had the exact same facial structure I had in my childhood photos. It was a physical blow, a harsh reminder of what was stolen from me. My father tried to play the role of the benevolent patriarch, stepping forward to shake my hand. I didn't stand up. I just nodded. Mason, my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. You look so successful. I am, I said simply, pulling out a chair for Emily. This is my wife, Emily. They all stared at her. I could see the immediate envy in Sarah's eyes. Emily exuded class and confidence, everything Sarah pretended to have. The dinner was agonizing. My parents spent the first course desperately trying to brag about Dylan. They talked about his promising new position at a logistics company, conveniently ignoring the fact that he was 30 years old and still relying on them for rent. Dylan couldn't look me in the eye. He focused entirely on his food, sweating profusely. Sarah, however, couldn't handle the dynamic shift. She couldn't handle that I was clearly wealthy, clearly happy, and clearly married to a woman completely out of her league. Her insecurity began to manifest as venom. As the main courses were cleared away, the tension at the table was suffocating. My mother, in a desperate attempt to create small talk, turned to Emily with a practiced, overly sweet smile. So, Emily, my mother said, you two have a beautiful home. Mason showed us pictures on his phone. Do you have any plans to fill those empty rooms with children? Dylan and Sarah are just such wonderful parents. I felt Emily stiffen beside me. Under the table, I reached over and grabbed her hand, squeezing it tight. Before Emily could formulate a polite response, Sarah let out a sharp, mocking laugh. Oh, I heard through Aunt Martha that you guys were having trouble, Sarah said. Leaning forward, a cruel smirk playing on her lips, she picked up her wine glass, swirling it casually. That must be so incredibly frustrating, wanting something so badly and just not being able to function properly to get it. The entire table went dead silent. Even my father looked shocked. Sarah didn't stop. She placed a hand on her stomach, puffing out her chest. I mean, it's just so natural for Dylan and me. In fact, we were going to wait until dessert to announce it, but I'm pregnant again. Number 3, we're just so blessed. I guess when a man and a woman really love each other, and they're healthy, God just rewards them. She looked directly at me when she said the word healthy. The implication hung in the air like toxic gas. She was calling me defective. She was mocking my wife's pain. She was using her fertility as a weapon to assert dominance because she realized she had nothing else. I looked at Dylan. He was staring at his plate, his face bright red, completely silent. He was letting his wife humiliate my wife. He was exactly the coward I always knew he was. I felt a cold, terrifying calmness wash over me. The storm had finally arrived. For 4 years I had held my tongue. For 4 years I had played the bigger person, walking away, focusing on my own life. But in that moment, looking at Sarah's smug face and my parents' complicit silence, the vault in my mind exploded. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a glass. I simply stood up, towering over the table. "Emily," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "Get your coat." "Now, Mason, don't be sensitive," my mother started, reaching out a hand. Sarah didn't mean it like that. I looked down at my mother, and the look in my eyes made her shrink back into her chair. The fuse was lit, and the explosion was going to leave absolutely nothing behind. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. The heavy oak legs scraped loudly against the polished hardwood floor of the restaurant. Every single head in the private dining area turned toward our table. The waiter, who had been approaching with a tray of water glasses, stopped dead in his tracks and quickly backed away. The suffocating silence in the room was absolute. I looked down at my family, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see authority figures or a younger brother to protect. I saw a group of small, pathetic strangers. "Sensitive?" I repeated my mother's word, letting it hang in the air. I looked directly into my father's eyes. "You want to talk about sensitive, Dad? Let's talk about the $40,000 you stole from my college fund. The inheritance my grandfather left for me, which you drained to pay for your golden boy's wedding. You robbed your own son to finance a marriage built on betrayal." My father's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked around nervously, suddenly very aware of the other wealthy patrons listening to every word. I turned my attention to Dylan. He was practically shrinking into his chair, his eyes glued to his half-eaten steak. "Look at me, Dylan," I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a whip. He slowly raised his head. He looked terrified. "You spent your entire life trying to be me. You wanted my car, you wanted my money, you even wanted my fiancée. And my parents handed her to you along with my savings. And look at you now. You are 30 years old, wearing a cheap suit, working a dead-end job, and you still can't afford to pay your own rent. You are a coward. You let your wife insult my family because you are too weak to be a real man. You took my leftovers, Dylan, and you built a garbage life out of them." Dylan swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing, but he remained completely silent. Finally, I turned to Sarah. Her smug smile had completely vanished. Her face was a mask of pure shock and humiliation. She instinctively pulled her purse closer to her lap. "And you," I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy register. "You thought you were making the smart, pragmatic choice. You listened to your toxic friends and decided that hitching your wagon to a lazy parasite was a better bet than standing by a man who was actually building an empire. You used your pregnancy as a weapon to secure a provider, but you chose the weakest man in the room. You can brag about your fertility all you want, Sarah. But you are trapped in a miserable marriage with a man who will never amount to anything, relying on the charity of 2 elderly people who had to steal to keep you afloat. I look at you, and I feel absolutely nothing but pity." I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket, pulled out 3 crisp $100 bills, and dropped them onto the center of the table. "This covers our drinks and your cheap dinner," I said. I turned to my wife, offering her my hand. "Emily, we are leaving." Emily stood up gracefully, her head held high. She didn't say a single word to them. She didn't have to. Her presence alone was a total victory. She took my hand, and we walked out of that restaurant together. I didn't look back. I didn't wait to see my father's rage or Sarah's tears. I walked out into the cool Denver night air, and for the first time in 4 years, The heavy, suffocating weight I had been carrying in my chest was completely gone. I could finally breathe. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment one below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. That night, Emily and I went home, poured a glass of expensive bourbon, and sat on the patio. We didn't talk much. We just enjoyed the quiet victory. But when Emily went to bed, I found myself wide awake. A dark, buzzing energy was vibrating under my skin. Confronting them in person was liberating, but a small, vengeful part of my brain wasn't satisfied. They had humiliated me publicly in front of our entire extended family and friend group back in Chicago. They had controlled the narrative, painting me as the bitter, career-obsessed workaholic who abandoned his family. I opened my laptop. I hadn't been on social media in years, but I knew about a massive anonymous forum where people shared stories of family betrayal and toxic relationships. I created a burner account. I sat in the dark, the blue light of the screen reflecting in my eyes, and I started typing. I didn't use real names. I didn't name the city, but I wrote down every single detail. I wrote about the 80-hour work weeks to afford the custom diamond ring. I wrote about my brother seducing my fiancée in my own apartment. I wrote about the dinner announcement. Most importantly, I detailed exactly how my parents stole my college fund, the inheritance my grandfather specifically left for my education, to pay for my brother's wedding at the exact venue I had booked. I poured 4 years of agony, betrayal, and rage into that keyboard. I hit publish and went to sleep. I woke up the next morning to thousands of notifications. The post had exploded. It had tens of thousands of upvotes and thousands of comments. People were outraged. They were furious on my behalf. But the internet is a terrifyingly efficient machine. Even without names, people love a puzzle. In the comments, amateur sleuths started connecting the dots. Some users noticed the highly specific details about the historical venue and the stolen college fund. Apparently, Sarah had been very active on her own public social media accounts back when the wedding happened, bragging about her beautiful venue and her new husband stepping up to be a father. Someone linked her old public wedding post to my anonymous story. The timelines matched perfectly. The details aligned. Within 48 hours, the anonymity was entirely gone. My story had been shared across multiple platforms, and people in our hometown had identified Dylan, Sarah, and my parents. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Aunt Martha. Mason, she said, her voice a mix of shock and dark amusement. Have you seen what is happening back here? I have a feeling you are going to tell me, I replied, leaning back in my office chair. It is everywhere, Martha said. Someone printed out your post and taped it to the community board at your parents' country club. People are sharing it in the local Facebook groups. Your father went to play golf yesterday, and 2 of his oldest friends refused to sit at his table in the clubhouse. They know Mason. Everyone finally knows exactly what they did to you. I felt a cold rush of satisfaction. I didn't plan for them to be exposed to our entire hometown, but I certainly wasn't going to stop it. The truth was finally out in the open, and the protective bubble my parents had built around Dylan was violently popped. The dominoes began to fall rapidly, and they fell hard. Aunt Martha became my personal news anchor, giving me updates on the absolute collapse of my brother's life. First, Dylan lost his job. His company caught wind of the viral story. While cheating on your brother isn't technically illegal, the story highlighted his terrible character. His boss decided to do a deep dive into Dylan's recent expense reports and accounts. They found discrepancies. Dylan had been skimming small amounts of money from company logistics accounts to fund his lifestyle. He was fired immediately for gross misconduct and threatened with legal action if he didn't pay it back. Sarah's life disintegrated next. The other mothers at her children's preschool read the story. They formed a group chat and systematically ostracized her. She was uninvited from birthday parties and playdates. Her best friend Qley, the one who had encouraged the affair in the first place, completely publicly abandoned Sarah to save her own reputation. The financial strain of Dylan losing his job, combined with the intense public humiliation, pushed their marriage to the absolute breaking point. They were screaming at each other daily. Then came the twist I never saw coming. I was sitting in my corner office in Denver, reviewing some blueprints, when my receptionist called. "Mr. Mason, there is a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it is a family emergency. She says her name is Sarah." My blood ran cold. "Sarah, here, in Denver. Send her in," I said. I quickly opened the voice memo app on my phone, hit record, and placed it face down on my desk. The heavy glass door swung open, and Sarah walked in. She looked nothing like the smug woman at the restaurant a month ago. She looked desperate, thin, and exhausted. She closed the door behind her and immediately burst into tears. "Mason, please," she sobbed, walking toward my desk. "I had to come. I used the last of my credit limit to buy a plane ticket. You have to help me." I didn't offer her a chair. I didn't stand up. "State your business and get out, Sarah." She wiped her eyes, stepping closer. She tried to put on a soft, vulnerable look, the same look she used to use on me years ago when she wanted something expensive. "Dylan is a monster," she cried. "He lost his job. He drinks all day. He blames me for everything. We are getting a divorce. I can't stay with him anymore, Mason. He ruined my life." "You ruined your own life," I stated plainly. She reached across the desk, trying to grab my hand. I pulled it back sharply. "Mason, I made the biggest mistake of my life," she whispered, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "I should have never left you. I see that now. You are a real man. You are successful. You are strong. I still love you. If you just give me a chance, I can leave him. We can start over. I will do anything you want." I stared at her in absolute disgust. She wasn't sorry. She was just broke. Her host had run out of money, so she was trying to latch back onto me. "Are you finished?" I asked. She blinked, confused by my lack of emotion. "Mason, I am serious. I am filing for divorce next week." I picked up my phone, stopped the recording, and saved the audio file. I looked up at her. "You are trespassing in a private corporate office. If you are not out of this building in exactly 30 seconds, I am calling security to have you physically dragged out and arrested." Panic flashed in her eyes. "Mason, please." 20 seconds. She turned and ran out of the office, sobbing hysterically. The moment the door clicked shut, I opened my email, attached the audio recording of her confessing to an impending divorce and begging to sleep with me, and sent it directly to Dylan's email address. I wanted him to hear exactly what his prize was really worth. Dylan's reaction to the audio file was explosive, but instead of directing his anger at his treacherous wife, he directed it at me. 2 weeks later, a thick, heavy envelope arrived at my office via certified mail. I opened it to find a cease and desist letter and an official notice of a defamation lawsuit. Dylan had managed to scrounge up enough cash to hire a desperate, low-tier lawyer. He was suing me for $500,000, claiming my anonymous internet post had caused intentional infliction of emotional distress, ruined his reputation, and directly caused his termination. I didn't panic. I didn't even sweat. I picked up my phone and called David. David was the lead corporate lawyer for my architectural firm. He was a shark in a tailored suit, a man who charged $1,000 an hour and never lost. I walked into his office, tossed the lawsuit on his mahogany desk, and sat down. David adjusted his glasses, skimmed the document for about 45 seconds, and then let out a sharp bark of laughter. "Who wrote this garbage?" "A first-year law student." "My brother," I said. "He thinks he can bleed me dry." David leaned forward, intertwining his fingers. "Mason, in the state of Illinois and federally across the board, truth is an absolute defense to defamation. Did he steal your fiancée? Yes. Did your parents misappropriate your college fund for his wedding? Yes. I have the old bank statements to prove the withdrawal and the venue receipts. Did he get fired for fraud? Yes. Then he has absolutely nothing. David smiled, a terrifying, predatory smile. He is trying to scare you. I am going to draft a response that will make this ambulance-chasing lawyer of his drop the case by tomorrow morning. I'll also file a countermotion for frivolous litigation, demanding he pay all of our legal fees for wasting the court's time. He will be bankrupt before he even steps foot in a courtroom. David was true to his word. The lawsuit was dropped 3 days later. Dylan's lawyer realized he was stepping into a woodchipper and abandoned ship. Dylan was left with mounting legal bills, no job, and a wife who had been caught on tape trying to offer herself to his rich brother. He was utterly, completely defeated. I had won. I had crushed them legally, financially, and socially. I should have felt like a king. But the greatest victory of my life didn't happen in a courtroom or an office. It happened that Friday night. I came home from work, exhausted but victorious. The house was quiet. I found Emily standing in our master bathroom. She was leaning against the marble counter, staring down at something in her hands. She was crying. My heart dropped into my stomach. I thought something terrible had happened. I rushed over to her. Emily, baby, what's wrong? She looked up at me. Her mascara was running, but she was smiling. The most beautiful, radiant smile I had ever seen. She held up a small, white plastic stick. There were 2 distinct, bold pink lines. I'm pregnant, she whispered, her voice cracking. Mason, we did it. We are going to have a baby. I dropped to my knees right there on the bathroom floor and wrapped my arms around her waist, burying my face in her stomach. I sobbed like a child. After years of needles, heartbreak, and feeling cursed, we had a natural pregnancy. The curse was broken. The universe wasn't punishing me. I was finally going to be a father. You would think that impending fatherhood and total victory over my enemies would bring me complete peace. But revenge is a dangerous drug. It rewires your brain. Even with Emily pregnant, even with my career skyrocketing, I found myself addicted to the dark thrill of my family's misery. I spent hours late at night scrolling through the community Facebook pages from my hometown under a fake name, hunting for gossip about Dylan and Sarah. I read about their messy divorce proceedings. I read about the custody battle over their kids. I read about my parents having to downsize their house because they were burning through their retirement to pay for Dylan's legal fees. Every new piece of terrible news gave me a sick, twisted rush of adrenaline. I was feeding a monster inside myself. The wake-up call came violently 6 months later. I had to fly back to Chicago to finalize a massive commercial real estate deal. I decided to take a few hours to visit Aunt Martha. After having coffee with her, I stopped at a local grocery store to pick up some flowers to bring back to Emily. As I was walking out of the store into the parking lot, I heard shouting. I stopped. Near the back of the lot, a group of 3 older kids, maybe 10 or 11 years old, were surrounding a smaller boy. They were pushing him, laughing, pointing fingers. Your dad is a thief, one of the older kids yelled. And your mom is a tramp. Everyone on the internet knows it. Your whole family is garbage. The smaller boy was crying hysterically, clutching a cheap backpack to his chest, trying to push past them. He looked up, his face red and streaked with tears. It was Julian, my brother's 7-year-old son. My nephew. A physical wave of nausea hit me so hard I stumbled. I dropped the flowers. I watched this innocent child, a boy who shared my blood, paying the brutal, agonizing price for the war adults had waged. He was being tortured because of the viral post I created. He was carrying the heavy, humiliating burden of my revenge. I took a step forward to intervene, to chase those older kids away. But before I could, my father's old sedan pulled up aggressively. My father jumped out, looking old and frail, and yelled at the bullies, grabbing Julian and pulling him into the car. I stood behind a concrete pillar, watching them drive away. My hands were shaking. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like a monster. I had spent 4 years hating my brother for destroying my life, and here I was, actively destroying the life of a 7-year-old boy who had never done anything wrong. I flew back to Denver that night. When I walked through the door, Emily was sitting on the couch, reading a book, her pregnant belly beautifully prominent. I collapsed next to her and buried my face in my hands. I told her what I saw in the parking lot. I told her about the late nights stalking their misery online. Emily put her book down. She placed her warm hand on the back of my neck. "Mason," she said gently, "you survived the poison they fed you. But now you are drinking it voluntarily. You are letting your hatred for them turn you into someone you are not. Look at me." I looked up at her. "We are having a son," she said, resting her hand on her stomach. "What kind of father do you want to be? A man consumed by the past, or a man building a future? The war is over, Mason. You won. Now you have to drop the sword." She was right. That night I deleted my fake accounts. I blocked every search term related to my hometown. I made a choice to starve the monster. 3 years passed. Our son, Isaac, was a whirlwind of energy. With Emily's bright eyes and my stubborn chin, fatherhood changed me. It softened the hard edges of my soul. I learned to build block towers instead of skyscrapers, and I learned that true power isn't about destroying your enemies, but about protecting the innocent people who depend on you. I hadn't thought about my brother or my parents in a very long time. Then the phone rang. I was at the kitchen island, watching Isaac mash peas into his hair, when my cell phone buzzed. It was Aunt Martha. I answered, expecting her usual cheerful updates. "Mason," she said, her voice heavy and thick with unshed tears. "It's your mother." I stopped wiping the counter. "What happened?" "She collapsed 2 days ago. They ran tests. This pancreatic cancer, Mason. Stage 4. It has spread to her liver and lungs. The doctors say it's highly aggressive. She has 6 months, maybe less." The kitchen seemed to spin slightly. I hadn't spoken to my mother since that disastrous dinner in Denver years ago. I had convinced myself I didn't care if they lived or died. But hearing the words stage 4 triggered something primal and deeply ingrained in my chest. She was still my mother. "She is asking for you," Martha whispered. "She knows she has no right, but she wants to see you before the end." I looked at Emily. She had stopped what she was doing and was watching me closely. I put the phone on speaker and told Martha I would book a flight. 2 days later, I was walking through the sterile, bleach-scented corridors of a Chicago hospital. The air felt heavy, thick with regret and impending loss. I reached the oncology ward and paused outside room 412. I took a deep breath, preparing to face the woman who had enabled the destruction of my early life. But before I could touch the door handle, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. It was Dylan. He was holding 2 plastic cups of terrible hospital coffee. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me. If I hadn't known it was my brother, I wouldn't have recognized him. He was 33, but he looked 50. His hair was thinning rapidly, his skin was gray, and the arrogant spark that used to define him was completely extinguished. He looked broken. The divorce, the public shame, the financial ruin, it had ground him into dust. Standing next to him was Julian, now 10 years old. Julian looked up at me. His eyes widened slightly. He pointed a small finger at me. Are you Uncle Mason?" the boy asked, his voice hesitant. "Grandpa showed me a picture of you once. Before." I looked down at the boy. He wasn't the crying child in the parking lot anymore. He was a cautious, observant kid carrying the weight of a broken family. "Yes," I said, my voice softening. "I'm your Uncle Mason." Dylan looked down at his shoes. His hands were shaking so badly the coffee was splashing onto the plastic lids. "Mason," he croaked, "I didn't know you were coming." "I'm here for her," I said coldly. "Not for you." I turned the handle and walked into the hospital room, leaving my brother standing in the hallway, clutching his cheap coffee, a ghost of the man he thought he was. My mother passed away 4 months later. The funeral was held on a miserable gray Tuesday. Cold rain lashed against the black umbrellas of the few people who attended. The massive scandal from years ago had severely thinned out my parents' social circle. It was mostly just family, a few loyal neighbors, and Aunt Martha standing firmly by my side. Emily had stayed in Denver with Isaac, pregnant with our second child, avoiding the unnecessary stress. I stood on the far side of the open grave, the wet grass sinking beneath my dress shoes. On the opposite side stood my father, looking shattered and lost, holding an umbrella over Dylan and Julian. We didn't speak during the service. We didn't make eye contact as the priest read the final prayers and the polished wood casket was lowered into the muddy earth. The finality of death makes all human conflict feel incredibly small and pointless. As the service ended and people began to walk back toward their cars, I stayed behind, staring down at the dirt. I heard the squelch of footsteps approaching in the mud. I didn't turn around. I knew it was Dylan. He stood about 5 feet away from me. The rain dripped from his hair down his face. "Thank you for coming," Dylan said. His voice was raw, stripped of all ego. It meant a lot to Dad. I kept my eyes on the grave. "I didn't do it for him." Dylan nodded slowly. He stood there in the freezing rain for a long time before he spoke again. "I hated you, you know," he confessed quietly. "My whole life. You were always smarter. You always worked harder. Dad always had to bail me out, but he secretly respected you more. I knew it. Sarah was just... She was just a way to prove I could take something from you. To prove I was better. But I wasn't. I was just a thief." He let out a shaky breath, swiping rain and tears from his face. "I lost her. I lost my job. I lost my dignity. I am living in Dad's basement, Mason. I am a joke. You won. You won everything." I finally turned to look at him. I saw a defeated, pathetic man. But I also saw Julian's father. I reached into the inside pocket of my coat and pulled out a thick, waterproof envelope. I held it out to him. Dylan looked at it, confused. "What is this?" "It's a trust fund document," I said. "I set up a college fund for Julian. It's locked. Neither you nor Sarah can touch a single penny of it. It transfers directly to him when he turns 18, and it can only be used for tuition and housing. He is going to need an education to get out of the mess you created." Dylan stared at the envelope, his hands trembling as he slowly reached out and took it. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock and a desperate, agonizing gratitude. "Mason, I don't know what to say. After everything I did to you, don't thank me." I cut him off, my voice hard but calm. "I am not doing this for you. I am doing this for him. I know what it feels like to have your future stolen by your own family. I will not let that happen to that boy." I buttoned my coat against the wind. "I don't forgive you, Dylan. I will never forget what you and Mom and Dad did to me. But I am done carrying this weight. I am done seeking revenge. I won't hate you anymore. Have a good life." I turned my back on my brother for the last time and walked away through the rain, leaving him standing by our mother's grave, holding the key to his son's future. That was 3 years ago. My father turned 70 last month. Against all my previous instincts, Emily and I decided to attend his birthday barbecue at his house in Chicago. We brought Isaac, who is now 6, and our 2-year-old daughter. I stood on the back deck, leaning against the wooden railing, holding a cold beer. The summer sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. I watched my son, Isaac, running around the yard, laughing hysterically as he played tag with Julian, who is now a tall, awkward 13-year-old. They were just 2 boys playing in the grass, completely unburdened by the brutal, toxic history that almost destroyed our family. Dylan was sitting at a picnic table across the yard. He was quiet, subdued. He works as a manager at an auto parts store now. He is sober, he pays his own rent, and he shares custody of Julian with Sarah. We aren't close. We probably never will be. We exchange brief, polite nods at family gatherings, and that is the absolute limit of our relationship. My father walked up next to me on the deck, watching the boys play. He looks fragile now, the fire that used to intimidate me completely burned out. "They are good boys," my father said softly. "Yes, they are," I agreed. "Mason," he started, his voice cracking slightly. "I look at what you built. Your family, your career. I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong about everything. I should have protected you. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on my son. You made your choices, Dad. I made mine. Let's just focus on making sure they make better ones. I realized in that moment what it truly means to be a man. It's not about how loud you can yell. It's not about how ruthlessly you can destroy the people who wronged you. Any fool can burn a house down. True strength, the kind of strength that lasts generations, is the ability to walk away from the ashes, take the broken bricks, and build a fortress for your own children. I didn't let my family's betrayal turn me into a monster. I broke the cycle. I built a legacy of protection, loyalty, and hard work. And looking at my son laughing in the summer sun, I knew I had won the only game that actually mattered. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I hope this resonated with you in some way. Family dynamics can be incredibly complicated, and sometimes the hardest thing in the world is learning when to walk away and when to show grace. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, having to set hard boundaries with the people you share blood with? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you are still here, listening to my voice right now, you belong to the 1% Club. Please comment the letter W below. W stands for winner. It's a secret sign for me to recognize the amazing people who stuck with me until the very end of this journey. If you appreciated this story, please hit the like button, and don't forget to follow for more real stories about life, survival, and coming out on top. See you in the next one.